Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. My name is Kayla Powell. I'm part of the team here at the National Center for Transgender Equality, and I'm joined by our Executive Director, Margaret Keisling.
Hi, everyone.
And a special guest, Margaret Huang, who's the Executive Director at Amnesty International USA. It's a pleasure to be with both of you today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Good.
very
And what
welcome.
an honor to be with Amnesty International, one of our favorite partners, which does so much really amazing work.
Absolutely. We are here today in part to talk about a really amazing campaign that Amnesty International has started for Aleejandra, a transgender person seeking asylum. Margaret, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you so much for supporting this campaign and for taking on Alejandra's case. So Amnesty has launched a campaign to try to secure the release of Alejandra under the hashtag PrideInAlejandra. And she is a transgender woman and a human rights activist from El Salvador who was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, when she crossed the border from Mexico. And despite the fact that her niece has been granted asylum and is waiting to be reunited with her, she has been detained for more than 6 months, and we're campaigning to get her out of detention.
Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of activism Alejandra has been involved in her home country?
Yeah, absolutely, Kayla. So Alejandra is from El Salvador, which is a particularly dangerous place for transgender people right now. And Alejandra has very bravely been standing up for a little more than a decade, fighting for trans people in El Salvador. And I just really feel some kindredness with her, and I'm just so proud of her. You know, when Amnesty interviewed her back in May, I read this. Alejandra said, now I want to get it right to use her words, and she can't be here, but as an older trans woman and a fighter for LGBT rights, I am a fighter all the way until the last day I'm on this earth. She's been supporting and fighting for trans people, and now it's time for us to support and fight for her.
Absolutely.
And Margaret, can you tell us a little bit about what forced her to leave her home country?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Alejandra has been persecuted for her identity and for her activism. She has faced extortion, she has faced threats, she has faced attacks. Actually, when our researchers had the chance to talk with her in person, they actually noted the scars that are on her scalp, her face, her legs, from multiple beatings that she's received from the last several years. She was actually sexually assaulted by members of a transnational criminal gang, as well as by the Salvadoran military. So she has faced dangers and risks all around from both private and public actors. And as you said, it's time for us to stand with her.
Yeah, and now she's still not being treated real well.
Yeah, it's an awful story, and it seems like it just got even worse when she arrived in the United States. Can you tell us about what happened?
Yeah, so she actually came to the border of the United States with her niece. They were both detained and placed in a private correctional facility in New Mexico. Her niece has been granted asylum because, in fact, they have a very valid case, as you can tell by the story. Unfortunately, she has not yet been granted asylum. She was deemed by the local ICE office as a flight risk, which is not true. And so she's been detained now for more than 6 months. And in truth, she has a place to go. Her niece, who now has the asylum, is living in Arizona, is ready to welcome her and to live together until their cases can be considered by a judge. And under international law, Alejandra is entitled to that court hearing, and that's what we want to see happen. She should be released and on parole so that she can have her hearing heard justly.
Okay, so she's in detention now. Can you tell me a little bit about the conditions that she faces in detention?
So that's one of our biggest concerns. She actually has a serious but treatable medical condition, and unfortunately ICE is not meeting its responsibilities to provide the medical care that she needs. She's had a series of health issues. She's made several requests to see a doctor, to go to the infirmary, and unfortunately her case has been misdiagnosed. She's not getting the treatment she needs, and after months of detention she's really at great risk, and we're demanding that ICE has to respect her dignity and to let her go so that she can get the medical treatment she needs.
So that's what Alejandra is facing. And we know that transgender people who are detainees are at particularly high risk for any number of different things. Mara, can you give a little bit of context here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the level of sexual assault faced by transgender people, particularly transgender women in detention, is just sky high. The sexual assault can be at the hands of another detainee or way too often at the hands of the actual authorities who are supposed to be protecting them. There's a lot of solitary confinement that happens to trans people. Sometime I could explain why, and it just doesn't make any sense. And the American Psychiatric Association says that solitary confinement of more than 2 weeks is really torture. And the trans people who I've talked with who have been through detention, who I visited with when I went to the Santa Ana detention center now a year or two ago, the solitary confinement can last for months, sometimes as much as a year. And that is just a horrible, horrible thing for us to do to any human being. And, ICE knows these are problems. We've pointed it out dozens, if not hundreds of times, and they know that they're taking responsibility for people's lives when they take them into detention. And we're seeing in the news over the last few weeks that they don't always do that in a very responsible way. And with trans women, most of the time it's not done in a responsible way. They know they shouldn't be putting them in solitary confinement, and they do. They know they should be stopping sexual assault, and they don't. And they know that people need medical treatment. We just talked about Alejandra and how she needed it, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about Roxana in a minute. And ICE knows these are problems, and these are problems for most trans people in detention.
That's right. And as Mara alluded to just a moment ago, there's one really terrible and awful kind of example of how these folks are not getting the kind of care that they need. Mara, can you tell us a little bit about Roxana Hernandez?
Yeah, so Roxana Hernandez was a 33-year-old trans woman who came here to escape violence in her home country, which was Honduras. And she sought asylum at a legal port of entry, and she was then detained by ICE and held in a detention center where she was just denied adequate food, denied medical treatment. She was kept in what they colloquially call the ice box. It's a cell that is much colder than anybody would feel comfortable or safe in. And she was initially just denied medical treatment altogether. And then when her condition got a lot worse, she was hospitalized, and then she passed away. And she was vulnerable. She was fleeing violence. She did not belong in detention. And we took responsibility for her and her safety. And we as a country, ICE in particular, blew that. And she passed away because of it. And we need to think long and hard as a country when we're facing people who are coming here to be safe, coming here to be protected, coming here because it's really their only choice. And we need to make sure that our values are applied to that. And right now they just aren't being applied in a way that most Americans would be comfortable about.
So we've heard about what Alejandra is facing. We've heard about what Roxana faced. We've heard kind of in general about the conditions that transgender women are facing in detention. Why hasn't ICE released Alejandra?
Unfortunately, the field office in El Paso actually has the ability to release her now. They're claiming that she's a flight risk. It's just not true. And one of the biggest challenges we have is that the U.S. government treats asylum seekers as people doing criminal activity, when in fact someone seeking asylum in the United States, seeking a safe haven, protection, is actually following international law. Anyone who comes to the country seeking protection from violence at home has a legitimate right to request asylum. And unfortunately, in these cases, what we're seeing is that ICE is ignoring those legitimate requests and instead treating people as if they were criminals, locking them up and detaining them for months on end.
Yeah. And by the way, these are international laws that we as the United States wanted, supported, have always
helped to create.
And now we're saying we're above the law. It is, it is just heartbreaking.
So I think the next thing that a lot of folks might be wondering is why is the Trump administration doing this?
The Trump administration has put out a narrative that this is all about national security. But if you look at the case of Alejandra, she doesn't pose any security risk to any of us. She's someone who in fact has faced her own risk, has taken risks to come seeking safety in the United States. And she is asking for help here. She's not asking for a handout, and she's also not a threat to anyone in the United States. Because the Trump administration has used this national security narrative, they're clearly building walls and building policies that are intended to keep everyone out. And that is not a national value of the United States. That is not our history. That is not who we are. We are a country that has always recognized the value, the benefits of welcoming people, not only who need help, but who want to become part of the American experiment with democracy, with human rights. And we're failing to do that at this moment.
I couldn't agree more. One of the most angering things about this is holding Roxana and not giving her medical treatment wasn't in anybody's interest. Not just not in Roxana's interest, it was not in our interest as a country, it was not in the interest of security. And holding Alejandra now is the same thing. ICE knows they cannot do it safely. ICE knows she is in danger. It is not in ICE's interest to be doing this, but the president thinks it's in his political interest to look tough. And real people's lives are ruined and ended because of this.
So I think it's fair to say that their human rights are being violated.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what, and this I guess is to you, Margaret, what can activists do, and what can the folks watching on Facebook Live, and they're going to see this on Facebook and Twitter, what can they do to help?
So the first thing anyone can do is to visit the amnestyusa.org website. You can sign a petition there and add your name to the hundreds of thousands of names we're collecting around the world calling for her to be released from detention. You can also get more information about her case and about other cases of people being detained on the website, and then use that to go out on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on other platforms, to let other people know what's happening. One of our biggest challenges is that people just don't know about the situation, don't understand what's happening in our name in this country. So the more information we can share, the more people will be outraged and will join us in taking action.
I hope everybody does. I have always been an Amnesty International fan, and it is heartbreaking that your work is needed in my country so much right now, that we are detaining people and killing people who just shouldn't be. And it is just heartbreaking, and I'm a big Amnesty International supporter, and I hope everybody goes to the website and signs the petitions and does what they can and supports this effort. Alejandra really needs us, and she has spoken up for so many trans people in her time. We want to see her released.
Let's do it for her.
Absolutely. So again, you can go to amnestyusa.org and see information there. On social media, you can tweet with the hashtag PrideInAlejandra, and make sure to tag Amnesty USA, tag us.
At Trans Equality.
At Trans Equality, at Amnesty USA. And we can try, if we try, we can make a difference here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate your support.
Oh, of course. And we'll see you next week right here.
Stay strong, Alejandra.
We're with you.